Hi, my name is Dane Sears. I am the writer, director, producer, and editor of Hopewell. Now, if you didn't know, that this film is actually based on a short film that I did called The Hopewell Haunting. I shot the short film in the summer of 2006, in between my junior year of college originally, and yeah, ever since then, I always, in the back of my head, I always wanted to turn that story into something bigger and better with more money and, better actors, just better everything all around. And that was really the origin of this movie. Now these screams you hear right here, they weren't the original screams we had in the movie. Actually, we didn't even really have screams originally. It was more of a coughing, gasping, choking sound that you heard. It was a lot less energetic than this, and this was actually just this year. 2022, not very long ago, very very long in the edit. Actually, while it was in post, I decided to up the intensity right now, like to what you hear, and it was all based on this experience I had. Not even a year ago, my girlfriend, we were taking her and her dog to the dog sitter. So we pull up to the dog sitter's house, and she gets out, and I just wait in the car for her. She gets out, and quickly after, she comes running back to the car with her dog, and I'm like, "What's the matter?" I was like, what happened?" I was like, "Why don't you drop the dog off?" She's like, and she didn't really say much, and then she's like, "Listen." So we rolled the windows down, and we just heard like bloody murder screaming coming from inside the dog sitter's house. This terrifying screaming, like someone was actually getting murdered inside of there, and it sent chills down me. And this was in broad daylight. No windows were open, the door was shut. It was that loud. Neighbors even heard it, and we thought, I was like, call 911. What, call 911. What are we waiting on? And it turned out, the dogs, she had some very, very large dogs in the house, but they were getting in a fight, and she was breaking it up. But, to us, we thought these dogs were mauling her in there, because it was eerie. She was screaming and begging, or not begging, but she was screaming for her life. And after that, I got to thinking, like, damn, I've never heard anything like that before. But that is exactly what I originally wanted with this film, and that kind of stuck with me. And I hired back the one actress who scream you heard in the original cut. I hired her back and kind of replaced the original less intense dialogue or voice acting with this new intense fight, a struggle. It's just yeah. And I'm very glad I did that, because I think it upped the intensity and the creep factor a whole lot more. Growing up, I was always a huge fan of ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, all the good little creepy stuff, the mysteries of the world. And I was always heard ghost stories. Always wanted to hear more ghost stories. Those were the only books that I read growing up, were ghost stories. And actually, scary stories to tell in the dark were actually those are my favorite books as a kid. And every night I'd get my parents to read me stories from it. They creeped me out, but they didn't scare me enough to where I couldn't sleep. But one story in particular was The Haunted House, and about this creepy ghost, about this preacher staying in this house, and this creepy ghost just keeps coming up the cellar stairs, keep like she wants to reveal herself to him, but she just keeps kind of like she's shy, and she keeps fading away into the darkness. And that story stuck with me ever since I was a kid, and that's eventually how later on in life, when I started making movies, I came up with the Hopewell Haunting. I kind of derived that scary story into that. With this film, I was always so dissatisfied with Hollywood ghost stories, because I guess you can consider me a ghost story connoisseur, a true ghost story connoisseur. Whether or not they are true or not, I've never had an experience myself. But I wanted to make something that was very true to that genre, and Hollywood movies are not true to that genre. It's everything is so unrealistic, so fake, and sometimes they have ridiculous twists. But I wanted to make something very true to that genre, and the same genre that Unsolved Mysteries, their little ghost segments would be about. And really, a movie that plays on the senses, like how real ghost stories do. They're not as visual as Hollywood, as movies you see. The ghost isn't always there out in the open scaring you or chasing you, whatnot. A lot of the time, people experience sounds more than anything else. They're be minding their own business and they hear these eerie sounds off in the house. And to me, that's always been the creepiest, sometimes more creepy than actually seeing something, because it's like your mind makes up what was that? Like, I don't even want to know the origin of what the hell made that sound. But making a story kind of true to that genre was really my intention with this film, basically making a true ghost story film. And I guess how I started writing this, like I said, with the short film, we finished it in 2007, and in 2010, I finally got writing on this, and it went through, the script went through many, many bad drafts, because I was very rusty as a writer, and it went through many bad drafts, but I started off every year, like, writing kind of the same story, kind of just cleaning it up a little bit. But I wrote every year with the intention of shooting it 1 year later. So in 2010, I wrote, and 2011 rolled around, and the script wasn't ready. I still really didn't have many connections for people to help me, and I didn't have the money. And so I wrote again 2011 with the intent to shoot in 2012. And 2012 rolled around, and the same thing happened. And I just kept writing and writing. And this repetitive cycle of failing over and over kind of just kept going until 2014, when I just couldn't get this script right. Like, what the hell was the matter with it? So I took a year off. I just like, what, I have to walk away from this, because I'd become obsessed with it. And I guess I still am getting it out, but I'd become obsessed, and it just consumed my life, and I had to walk away from it because I just could not think of how to make this script better. And well, yeah, in 2015, I started fiddling and moonshining to kind of get my mind off of everything. And well, by the end of that year, I had been, in the back of my head, I'd been jotting down notes, like, how can I change the story? Because, originally in the short film, the preacher is this happy-go-lucky, just character there's really nothing special about him. He's just, there's nothing odd or different, no drama. And well, so I started playing with the idea, like, well, this guy needs a flaw. Why not he be just a dick, So I was like, okay, we can work with that. Well, why is he a dick? Well, at that time, I had been grieving for, a year, if not a year and a half, over this one girl I had been dating for many years, 12 years to be in fact, which is a very long time to date someone. And, it had ended. But I was having the hardest time, it felt like, getting over her. And so I kind of thought, like, man, am I going to feel this way the rest of my life? Like, am I constantly going to be pining over this girl, years later? Because here it is, 2-3 years later, and I'm still just almost feel like at square one. So I started, I don't know, something clicked. I'm like, well, what if that happened to this preacher character? What if, a girl he loved, and he was going to marry her, what if she just up and ran off and she married another guy, which is what happened to me? I guess it's a pretty common story for breakups and whatnot. But anyway, yeah, this happened to him, and what if he never got over it? Because that's the way I felt. Like, is this ever going to end? It's like, I'm going to be an old man, and here I am still pining over this girl. And so that's kind of how I put the backstory, or I guess the motive of why he is the way he is. I kind of wove that in. He's long ago he had a lover, and she ran off on him, married another guy, and now he just can't get over it. And now here he is, as pathetic as it is, here he is years and years and years later, and he's still pining over, and his life just kind of, went to shit. He's given up. He doesn't care anymore. He's let himself go. He's let his church go. He doesn't care about his job anymore. And, he just needs a fire lit under his ass to, get him to do what he needs to do to move on with his life. And I guess that's also a big metaphor that I wove into this film is, this preacher kind of has this block. He wants to move on with his life, but he can't, because he can't get past this girl that broke up with him a long time ago and these sad memories. He just can't move past it. And this film was somewhat of that for me. It's like I'd become obsessed with this movie, getting it made. I tried year after year after year to get it made, and I couldn't. And it's just like, man, I want to move on with my life. Please let me shoot this movie finally, because I can't rest. I can't move on to anything else until I get this done. This was kind of standing in my way of developing and going further in life. Always loved that shot. But so I developed this preacher character a little more. I gave him a good backstory. I gave him a reason to be a dick like he is. And I turned him into this little feeble old man, which, in the short film, he looks like he's in his 30s, and he's Amish. And I also brought in the characters of Newt and Ollie. Originally, they weren't in the script, or they're not even in the short film. So I had to bring in these other characters that are trying to really live in this house to kind of give the preacher a reason to go out here. And actually, funny story, or not funny story, but cool story is Newt and Ollie, they were actually real people, Newt and Ollie Fryman. Growing up in my family, we had a ghost story that was passed down through the generations from very, very distant relatives of these people in Harrison County, Kentucky, who lived in this haunted house at one point. And it was so bad, like the noises at night, that everybody slept in one room and was really too scared to go anywhere else. And this house was just, very, very creepy. It tormented these people to an extent until they finally got up and left. But I thought that would be a cool kind of thing to do, to weave those real characters, base these people experiencing this haunted house on real life people that actually existed and experienced kind of the same thing. We shot this film with an extremely small crew. There was me, which I ran the camera most of the time. I had Brant, who is my, gaffer, DP, my buddy Witsanupong or Lee or L, wherever you want to call him, big guy in Asia right now. He was my producer. Then I had my key grip Josh, sound guy, and sometimes a makeup guy, and I had a PA. So it was really this skeleton crew of like 6-7 people the whole time. Now, if you're wondering why this first trip to the house, the driving and the walking through it, is kind of slower than normal, I wanted to communicate that this house is pretty far out in the country. Like, you can't even get to it from the road. There's no driveway. That's why you see him get out of his car and walk to it. I wanted the audience to kind of explore this house, go on this adventure with the preacher, and kind of realize, like, man, this place is far. Like, good God, how far out of our comfort zone are we going to go? And we're slowing it down right now inside the house, because this house was gold, this interior location. And I wanted the audience, like I said, to experience this haunted house with this preacher, walk around it and see in every little corner, every little nook and cranny, just take it in, as opposed to the general movie where it's, editing, where it's cut, where we don't really get any chance to see the scenery. But yeah, that's why kind of the first part, his first trip to this house, is a little slower. But of course we speed it up later after we've kind of taken in this environment. If you've seen the short film Hopewell Haunting that this is based on, you'll probably notice that this interior house is the exact same house that we used. Just only now it's a lot dirtier and a lot nastier, because it actually did get infested with raccoons and other live animals right after we shot the short film. And they completely destroyed the place. It took so much prep and a dirty job work to get it to what you see here. And the dead raccoon you just saw, that was actually, it's fake, of course, because my original intentions was to get a real one and put it in there to shoot it, but thinking of how smelly it would be, I decided to buy a fake one, and spray paint it. Actually looked like a possum, and I spray painted it to look like a raccoon, but I thought it worked pretty good. But back to the house getting infested. If you look up over the preacher's shoulders right there, you'll see these brown streaks down the walls and these brown markings up around the ceiling where the rafters are, and that was where the raccoons had gotten in, and just they had shit all down the walls and all in the walls, basically everywhere. I have never seen so much shit in my life. They had just spent years in there just tearing everything up and shitting after we shot the short film. So prepping for this film was a very extremely dirty ass task. I spent many hot summer days shoveling raccoon shit, out of the walls, off, everywhere that I thought my cast and crew might be, to where we'd stir up dust and breathe it. And so yeah, I cleaned all of it up and I swept it out, and then I Lysoled and kind of sanitized everything the best I could, and then re-dirtying it back up with a lot of actual fake raccoon turds that Cody, my PA, him and I actually made a bunch, mixed with paint, and decorated the set with. Made a clean version. And this right here is the first inkling of who might have killed her, kind of tying the judge possibly into being the one who killed her. And this actually was based on a real, true ghost story here, this writing on the wall. If you Google Borley Rectory writing on the wall, you'll see the images look exactly like that, and it was around this exact same time. And most all the actors you see in Hopewell, they were people that I knew, that I had met over the years while I worked in the film industry here in Kentucky. But in 2012, when I was originally trying to shoot the film, I had already cast Rich Williams, who is the judge, Audra Todd, who is Ollie, Tim Morton, who plays Newt there. He actually met him on the old-time music scene here in Louisville, Kentucky. He's actually a very good fiddler, pretty funny dude, and crazy enough as it is, he was actually, as I'm getting to meet this guy playing music, I find out he is an actor. He was he was a lead in a movie called Men Go to Battle. So I watched and I'm like, oh man, this guy's got some chops. And he's about the same age. I like Newt. He kind of looks like him. So, thank goodness Tim agreed to do it, and he did a great job.
Yes, sir.
But Ted Ferguson, our lead, I got him off of actorsaccess.com. I really had no other way of, no other method of finding actors for this film, and I knew I needed someone great to be the lead, someone really not from Kentucky, because everybody here, they either did not look the part, if they had any kind of acting chops, they didn't look the part by a long shot. And almost kind of the same thing on Actors Access. I got guys submitting from LA and Atlanta and New York, all over the place, and it was very hard to find this little feeble old hairy man like I wanted. And lo and behold, here's Ted Ferguson. He sends me an audition video, and I was like, oh my God, that's him. We about killed each other during this shoot, but that's that's another story. The look of Hopewell is based on my love for 16 millimeter 1970s cinema. Specifically, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That movie, that's one of the reasons I like it so much. I love it so much, I guess what you'd say, is the dark, gritty, raw look of it. I've heard so many movies now, like in the commentaries or behind the scenes, they always reference Texas Chainsaw Massacre or another 70s grindhouse looking picture as their look reference, but the film looks nothing like it. So I wanted to try something different with this one, and to help get this look, of course, I wanted to shoot it on 16 millimeter originally, but unfortunately nobody I knew had any experience with 16 millimeter. I didn't, and I also did not have the money for it. So thank God, Joe Rubenstein, I think is his name, he developed this camera called the Digital Bolex D16. And this camera is basically a digital 16 millimeter camera with a 16 millimeter size sensor, and you could use old vintage 16 lenses on it. So I jumped all over that. I bought one, and I bought several old vintage lenses, especially the zoom lens that you see a lot of zooms in the film here. But I had like a 5.9 millimeter, which is the El Mariachi really wide angle lens. Actually, it's this shot right here. And I had a Zeiss 8 millimeter, and then the Ingenue 5.9 to, I think it was 70 millimeter, which was primarily the workhorse for the film, because there's a lot of zooms to help communicate that look and that feeling that I was going for as this being a retro film. I even toyed with the idea at one time, shooting it on Super 8. Like the original short film, I shot that on black and white Tri-X Super 8 film. And so I was like, well, I wonder what color would look like. And it would have been, I'm glad I didn't do the Super 8 look. Yeah, this shot right here is inspired by Rocky, when Rocky kind of first comes in his apartment, when we first see where he lives. It's kind of this long shot that, just kind of sets on the scenery, and he kind of walks in and turns the radio on and settles into his normal nightly routine. And here is where it starts, his memories. Everything comes flooding back once he hears this song, a song that he hasn't heard in a very long time. That was, in my head, it was their song. Because that's what would happen to me with, like I said, this grieving process. There'd be times where I'd get better, and I'd forget about it for a little while, and then here I would hear a song on the radio, a song that was ours, and here everything would come flooding back, and I would just be in this kind of depressed, really sad mood. And so I also wove that into this character. That's kind of, when the film starts out, he's in between ruts, and now is when we start seeing him falling back into this rut, because this song is kind of helping him, pushing him to that point again, opening that door again. And here's the introduction to a very big prop, the handkerchief. Funny enough, the S, that initial is an S. Yeah, this handkerchief, I wrote this in as a way of symbolizing, his how much he depends on her, how much he is still, locked in with her thoughts and the memories of her, and he can't move on. And this is like, that thing acts as like his blankie, his security, his comfort. And that's why at the end of the movie, he loses it while he's at the house. He loses it, and then he makes it through the rest of the night without this thing. And then at the end, he finds it, and here he goes. He looks at it, and he's like, you know what? I made it this far. I did this on my own. I don't need this anymore. I'm moving on with my life. I'm moving past this. And that's, the big reason why the handkerchief was written in, to especially visually communicate that he has moved on with his life. He has changed. Which is also why you see a lot of cicadas, and you hear a lot of cicadas in this film. Because cicadas symbolize change and growth, and that's essentially what this film is about. Him changing and growing beyond, getting past this big point in his life he hasn't gotten past for a very long time. And I made sure, like you hear here, I made sure to weave in many of my favorite hymns that I grew up in church listening to. There's Christine. Originally, Christine, played by Jennifer Feldposh, she had more of a purpose in the film. I had a scene that was kind of, it let her shine later on in the film. The part where the preacher comes in and breaks down in church and starts crying, she actually had a decent role in that scene. That kind of gave purpose to her, mostly being in the film, besides just in the background playing the piano. Because, a side note there, you see how he looked at the wedding ring and he shook his head. That was something that would happen to me a lot. I would everywhere I went, I would look, there'd be a couple. I'd see a couple and I'd look down and I'd see, do they have a wedding ring on? And I'd see it and I'd just get so jealous. It was just part of that grieving process. But anyway, yeah, Christine, she's there playing the piano, and she's always there observing what's going on in this church, like even right now. And she's been there for a long time. So, she's witnessed over the years, just like the judge witnessed this preacher, running people off and, yelling at them like he does here and just not helping them. And so I kind of wrote her in a lot of these scenes to observe this situation right here. And later on, when the preacher starts breaking down and he sheds a tear, and originally the scene was longer than that, and she comes in and gives him a Bible verse and a few little words of good luck. Actually not words of good luck, but encouragement, kind of hints at him at what he needs to do to move on with his life, because she knows, she's been there, she knows what his problem is, she's seen it all. So she kind of helps. Her character was written in to help give him a push in the right direction. But another element to that extended scene that I had that she shined in was that the music to it was, I guess you could say, almost gave it a Hallmark Lifetime movie feel. It was a beautiful piece of music that Will Wilder, my best friend, had written. But, the scene just took on a completely different feeling. It felt odd in the middle of this creepy ghost drama. And so with help from my buddy Dwayne Graves, he actually suggested that, perhaps you should, cut that out. Like, whenever the preacher goes in there and starts breaking down, I think, that's enough for the audience to derive that, he knows what to do. He can't take this anymore. He's got to do something. So, I cut it down, and unfortunately, I had to cut Christine there out too. She was such a great actress. She was very lovely to work with. It hurt to do that, but unfortunately, that's filmmaking.
Thanks for making this so easy on us. I hope you go home to a nice...
We shot this film initially in September of 2016 over the course of 3 weeks. It was 2016. I started writing it in 2010. So here it was 6.5 years later, and we finally got to shoot it. And it had taken so much out of me to get to that point. And like I said, most of it, we shot about 80% of it. And after that, I had to walk away for a while, because it had taken so much out of me to get it this far. And the shoot didn't really go the way I wanted it to. So I actually took, to show how exhausted I was, I didn't even look at any of the footage until about a year later. I looked at the footage and realized that, we still needed a lot more, and we needed to reshoot some things. So yeah, so after we originally shot 80% of the movie, about a year and a half later, a lot of, actually 40%, we had to go back, but I guess 40% of what you see here now is reshoots, a year and a half later. And like I said, that's low budget filmmaking. You got to do those types of things. And here is our introduction to the judge. Judge Pierce, named after Charles B. Pierce, who is one of my filmmaking idols. Yeah, in both these cars you see in the film, these Model A's, they were owned by the same guy, Bill. Oh God, what a character! I guess a funny story, I guess I could tell is, I've been trying to find these cars for a while, and a lot of the people who own these cars just wanted to hold on to them and basically keep them as just clean and pristine and not touch them, not really even use them or drive them. And I finally found a guy who wasn't that way. This guy had 2 Model A's, and he was like, yeah, I'll work with you. And so I go to meet him, and I call him up, and I schedule a meeting, and I arrange for come out to his house to meet him. And on the phone, he's like, you know what? You coming out? Bring some beer, and not that pussy shit. A real ice beer. And I was like, is this guy testing me? Like, if I go actually buy beer and bring it, is this guy going to be like, nope, you brought beer, you ain't going to drive my car? But I was wrong. He's a hell of a character and a very cool guy. But he owned both of these cars here. And those cars were one of the biggest stressors while I was making this film, because I was solely responsible for him while he was in Africa. I had to watch over these things and make sure that, they didn't break down, which they did several times. Kind of held up the production a few times, but back to the house, and this is where he sees it. Yeah, see, this is all a part. This is a year and a half later than what we just saw him walk into the house. And another funny note is on the outside of the house, what we just saw him walking in. The yard's pretty good looking. It's pretty overgrown, looks pretty healthy. In the initial shoot, when we actually got into pre-production, the house, it was actually, the weeds were about 7 foot tall, way over my head, to where you couldn't even hardly see the house. And I'm like, holy shit, this place needs to look overgrown and abandoned, but it looks too overgrown and abandoned. So I had to get a weed eater and a brush blade and go out there and just spend days and days in the hot sun knocking down these weeds with my buddy Cody. Oh, it was so hot. But knocking these weeds down to try and make this place not look as overgrown, but in the process, I knocked down way too many. And when we did the first round of shooting in 2016, the yard was very dead. It was, I guess we had a drought too, where it was the end of summer, but it was very dead looking. The weeds didn't look anything like they do now. So yeah. But at the end of the movie, you'll actually in the front yard when Ted here apologizes to Newt and Ollie. You'll actually see that original front yard when I'd knocked it down. If you look close, all the weeds and everything are pretty dead and yeah, not near as healthy as they were as you just seen, which is part of the reshoot. See, here's where he sees it. He just doubted and doubted. Then, and this was like an element I wanted to borrow from a lot of, a story I'd read that scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. How these over in France, these kids would hear footsteps running down the path behind them, outside of this haunted house, and it would lead to a graveyard. And right now, my intention here is, this ghost is hinting at him, like, trying to get him, leading him around, trying to, show him what she wants, what she needs. And in my head, the footsteps run out the back door and toward this graveyard where she would like to be buried. And the pocket watch there, I never fully decided, but that pocket watch is to also help link Judge Pierce to, like, did he actually kill this girl? We don't know. Hence also why you see the pocket watches in his house and him using one at the church during church Sunday scene. Yeah, originally I wanted this scene to be shot right at dusk. But, that's low budget filmmaking. You got to make a lot of sacrifices, and you do it when you have time and you can. But I was very pleased with this scene. And the music, too. Yeah, the music, I actually did 90% of it myself. Everything that wasn't like an actual musical melodic composition. I studied the Texas Chainsaw Massacre again because that's the mood that I wanted. Again, just like the look of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's no movie out there that I've heard that has that same type of soundtrack. That raw, eerie, dark, the most atmospheric soundtrack. And so I wanted to recreate as much as I could. And so I did a lot of studying on how Tobe Hooper and Wayne Bell kind of did it. And yeah, I rented a upright bass, a 4-string bass. They used a 5, but I got a 4 and like tuned the low string down a lot, and just I bowed on that thing a lot and just got these perfect rumbles that, I can't do it. And I would often hang things from them, like little jingle bells and other bells and cans, to get it to rattle whenever you would bow it. The little noise you hear right here is actually a singing bowl. It was like Tibetan singing bowls. And off to his left there, that wall, I had to build that wall. And here's where he gets the shit scared out of him. And just like in real life ghost stories, the sounds just dissipate immediately. And it was funny. You know, Ted Ferguson, right? He was such a trooper. Like right there, it was. If you listen to the audio of his lavalier audio, it sounded like we were killing him. He was breathing so hard. I felt bad when I listened to that. I'm like, oh damn. But he does his cardio. But yeah, he was. I put him through the ringer running like that. And he did a hell of a job. So glad I found him. And this was actually near the very, very tail end of the shoot. Or actually, this may have been the last night we shot. And this church here, this location was so perfect. I found that one probably before I found any of the other locations. It was way, way off in the country outside of Carlisle, Kentucky, and it was abandoned. And we lucked out a whole lot with a lot of locations in this film, but specifically this one, because there's a little bridge that goes up to the church that crosses over a stream. And while we shot the film, we could drive over there because I needed the preacher's vehicle to be right there in front of the church to get some of these shots. And well, everything worked great. And then months after we got done shooting, that bridge washed away. It had been there for so long, it washed away, and a huge tree fell on the side of the church and ripped like a 20-foot tall hole in it. I always love this shot. I'm very, very proud of that one. I love this scene. It's just that realization, like, oh my God, you saw it too. And the preacher here, he doesn't know how to deal with this. So he does, he goes to his default and just runs them off like he did everybody else. I remember we shot that, the crew laughing like at Tim's line there. What? Yeah, and originally, like I said earlier, Christine, she was in the movie a lot more, but I had to weave her out. She was even in this scene because, like I said, she observes all this. She's always there, kind of seeing what's going on, and I had her also here for this, playing the piano still, which was a good juxtaposition because I had another favorite hymn in there, and I thought it was, like I said, a great juxtaposition. This happy hymn over top of this kind of dark conversation and dark situation. But yeah, where I had to edit her out, and it was kind of funny too, her still being there playing the piano. So yeah, sadly I had to take it out. Again, another line borrowed from Rocky there. I'm 71 years old. Like when Mick, leaves Rocky's apartment.
We don't know where else to go.
I'm sorry. I can't help you anymore. But you can't stay here.
A lot of these locations were, like I said, everything was abandoned. And this church was in pretty bad shape when we got there. I had to do a lot of painting to make it still need to look run down for the film, but I had to do a lot of painting and fixing it up, specifically the sweeping the floor and mopping it because there was actually a dead animal in there. Yeah, I had to fix it up a lot, and there were like an odd number of pews I had to build. I had to build a few pews to put in the background of the shot to help fill out like a 2-row church. That's kind of pretty standard, and we couldn't have gotten a better location. And I always had this nightmare sequence or insomnia sequence. I always had this. It was one of the first things I thought of when I started rewriting. I don't know. It was like on New Year's Day or something. I sat there and thought of this. I'm like, damn, that'd be pretty cool. Which was It's also kind of inspired by Cabin Fever when we actually finally see what he saw. It doesn't matter if anybody's in the house, like right here, the sounds still reverberate from the inside throughout the still of the night. And there's a local actor in Kentucky, Stacey Gillespie. This was about a year and a half. No, about 1 year later after the initial shoot. And you'll see me, if you look at that beginning shot, you'll see me off on the far right, kind of sitting on the edge of the frame, just trying to give an illusion like maybe there's more people on the other side. There's my aunt and step-uncle.
Still not here? No, sir. Not yet.
This shot right here is one of my favorite shots in the film. I love that long pull out like that. And praise my friend Christopher Robin, I call him. He was the first AC on that shot. He pulled focus like a champ. He didn't even have a monitor either. He just did it the old school way by looking at the numbers on the side and pulling it. That sounds pretty dirty, but yeah. But yeah, right there behind her is where the tree fell in the church and ripped a big old hole down the side. And here he is. He's down for the count now. After reliving these memories of this girl, kind of reliving the past, falling back into this hole again. And after getting run out of the house and the shit scared out of him, he's down for the count. He's done. And he's just kind of looking at her, just digging for any little, looking at her picture. They're just digging for any kind of little help or strength he can. And we lucked out with this location as well. Right before we shot, the tenants had moved out and it was empty. So I rented it for a month. Thank goodness, that the people were cool enough to let me rent it, because they had people actually wanting to move in. But the house was, it still had some modern, modernizations to it, but not very much. It could totally play as a house from the 30s. And the hat on the wall, I'll try and cover up things that were modern. But after we had shot, the owners, of course, renovated it and built up a lot around the outside. So, yeah, we got there just in time before it was, more modernized.
Why didn't you show this morning?
Guess I just didn't feel like it.
And this scene's where kind of Rich Williams' character kind of shines, or his acting ability, I guess is what you'd say. I got to say, Rich was probably the best actor I had and had the most experience. And he was an old military guy himself, so I guess he could do this ball busting part pretty naturally. You see he reacts very well to the environment and the other actors.
What's the matter with you?
And an inspiration for his character, I guess the look of him was William Howard Taft. I just wanted to be this old rich guy, the richest guy around there, and he has all the money and the power, and what he says goes.
You've not come back now, did you? Did you?
Yes, I did. Because I don't want them.
He's a little angrier than what I wanted, but it worked. It worked. I wanted him, in the original, my head, I wanted him to be kind of smug and just throwing his weight around and has all the confidence in the world he's going to run this guy out without really getting, kind of getting in his feelings a little bit. But it works. The newspaper on the wall behind the XXO calendar behind the preacher, that's actually covering up a circuit box.
Around my congregation.
James, Newt Fryman is a good fella. His wife has her problems, but you don't know how hard they got it right now. A lot harder than you, trust me. Least you can do is help them out.
Now, why don't you help?
I am helping them out. I'm the one who got them out of the house out there, and now they're staying with me.
And a lot of these scenes, a lot of these locations, I guess I should also point out, is I couldn't find any help for a production designer, art department, really any of that. So I had to do all of it myself. just one of the exhausting things about making this film, because I wore many hats doing this. You know, I kind of one man banded mostly during pre-production and post-production. You know, thank God I had a very skeleton crew while we were shooting. But I bit the bullet and I did what I needed to do to get this film made. And I just kept telling myself, you know, I'm gonna put in this much time and energy and effort this one time to just prove myself. I just wanted to prove that I wasn't just all talk. I could actually make a film. And with this, you know, I would never have to one-man band and work so hard again, because I would have proof, and I could convince people. You know, I could use that to get more money and convince people to work with me, so they know I'm not just blowing smoke up their ass. So that was really the big reason why I did most all this myself, because I couldn't find any help and I had to do it. I learned a lot. I learned I don't really want to do much besides directing.
Said he's okay though? Oh, he's fine.
If you look behind in the window behind the judge there, you'll sometimes see like the light illuminate my hand holding the camera whenever we get in the shadow. But
Just another one of his spells.
yeah, if you look behind Tim there, his right shoulder, you'll see a kind of residue on the window. That was from a sticker the owner had to peel off, because obviously, you know, that wouldn't have been there back in Prohibition era days.
Some girl he used to court a long time ago.
And here's where we kind of get a little hint into, you know, I guess Tim finds out, sorry, not Tim, but Newt finds out why he is the way he is. And the audience too kind of gets a little more into a glimpse of, you know, the preacher's problem.
Got married and he found out about it.
And originally that scene I keep bringing up, where it was longer, where he breaks down and cries, he actually he prays. The prayer was longer, and he actually tells us that, you know, he can't move on with his life. He can't get over her. Just please get her out of my head. I just want to move on with my life. I can't do it on my own.
That's probably what his problem
But, you know, in hindsight, it was too much. I'm glad we kind of kept it a little more, yeah, not as blatant, and cut that monologue. Although Ted keeps giving me hell for it, because it also helped him shine as an actor. Again, another inspirational shot from Rocky, when, you know, the huge wide shot of the Spectrum when he walks in there all by himself. And here is where my best friend's musical abilities really shine, his composition. He put together such a great piece. It communicated the mood so good. And this is the scene I kept talking about that was originally longer. See, right now we just kind of see him sit and he starts crying, he starts the prayer, and we cut out. But it was all a lot longer than that, with Christine kind of coming in and somewhat coming to his rescue. And here it is. There's his blankie. Just looking at it like, man, I can't keep doing this. And this scene too, it's like, you know, after he's just been threatened to be run out, you know, his life's going to be turned upside down. He's going to be in worse shape than he is right now. He kind of comes in there and he's like, I got to do something. I can't run away from this. I got to do something. And he kind of looks around. He kind of finally sees, you know, that damn, what have I been doing? This place is a wreck. He's finally taking in how bad his life has gotten. And that kind of like says has helped with how decrepit the church is in. So I kind of left a lot of that detail in there and tried to, you know, shoot it to help portray, to show just how much he's let this place just run down, you know, just like his life. Once again, the pocket watch just kind of helped tying Judge Pierce to, you know, well, did he kill her? And another, we lucked out here too, like this historical house. I was like, yeah, we could probably find a room in there to shoot. And just my imagination in the script, I'd come up with this portrait on the wall of this woman, this young woman. But we went to this location, and lo and behold, here's this portrait of a young woman right over the mantel. It's like it couldn't have worked out any better. And that's actually Waveland Estate, not the same house we see later on in the movie as the exterior. Which I guess I should also point out that if you haven't caught on, the haunted house, it's actually a different house on the outside than it is on the inside. The house on the inside, where a lot of the movie takes place, is actually it's not that creepy on the outside. It's actually pretty nice. It's there's a big brand new plank fence going around it, and a huge pole barn standing right out behind it. So yeah, shooting exteriors there is out of the question. I had to find another house, and preferably one with not a driveway to it that was way off in the middle of nowhere. And thank God, I'll give a shout out to Gary Gettings. He found that place for me, and thank goodness. I'm still very thankful that the owner was cool enough to let us shoot there, because so many people I've ever come in contact with that own locations, they don't want you there. They don't want to hear why, or they don't want to hear any reasoning. They're stuck in their ways, and they don't want you there. I guess thinking you're going to sue them, but the owner was so cool and so nice, and that's actually me right there walking through that graveyard. The preacher grew some muscles and got a little taller. Yeah, broke the 180 rule again, but it's okay. See, yeah, if you notice the yard, it's kind of, like I said, take that in, how overgrown it is right now. There's this holding on for comfort, grasping for strength, using his blankie. Yeah, and to get this shot right here, I had to go inside of that place, and it was nowhere near as structurally sound as our interior house, the one you see right here. And just going in there, it was pretty nerve-wracking, because I know I was going to fall through the floor or encounter some kind of animal. Yeah, it was creepier than actually this place on the inside. Like I said, it just wasn't safe. And if you notice, a lot in this movie, I do a lot of point of view shots, which I don't know. I kind of thank John Carpenter for that. Originally I had, you could probably say, too many, and I had to take out a lot. I kind of overdid it. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be staying in that house preparing for a night. No way. And this shot was kind of an homage to kind of recreating the shot from the short film, right when the preacher goes in there ready for, waiting on night to come. Yeah, this one right there, where it fades out with his kind of silhouette in the window. Yeah, in most movies now, or really throughout time, they always show a full moon. I'm like, why don't they show a really sharp crescent moon? Because, to me, it'd be kind of creepier, because the night would be even more pitch black. It wouldn't be as illuminated, and I don't know, it's kind of cooler. So that's the reason why I put the crescent moon in there. And that fire was a pretty big pain to deal with, too, because the chimney was off limits. You couldn't, it was beyond repair, and I was always worried I was going to catch the house on fire, so I had to plug it up with sheet metal and create this gas rig I'd seen on set while I was in Texas on a movie, how they kind of created a campfire. It was actually just a little propane fire. And this right here was always something that always creeped me out, the thought of this. Here you are alone in this house, way out in the middle of nowhere. You're kind of looking around this one room. You're kind of looking around this one room. There's nothing there. You go back and sit down, and you look back to where you just were, and there's somebody looking at you. It's like I was just right there, and they were right beside me. To me, that's always, eesh. I always loved that, barely seeing her face illuminated.
Who are you?
And I love those scampering down the hall, scampering away footsteps. Originally, I didn't plan on having those in there. I added them in post because, Yeah, I just thought it'd be a nice touch. But lighting these interiors at night here, it was pretty. It was pretty. It was It was pretty tough. Not so much in the room with the fire, but out here whenever he gets the lantern out, it was kind of imitating that lantern light. That's actually my hand grabbing the handkerchief there. There's a lot of shots in this movie that a lot of shots that if you don't see the preacher's face, you just see a hand or a foot or a leg, whatever. It's more likely it's me. As an homage to Evil Dead, it's called fake shimping. I had to do that a lot to get all the shots I needed, which I guess normally in movies a B unit would do that. Of course, with low budget like this, you don't have a B unit. You got to do it. And here's where he's getting the creepier hint of what happened to this woman. And this was, like I said, I wanted a movie that played on the senses, more specifically just these sounds that echoed out from the darkness. And we never, even if you looked, you wouldn't see any origin. So your mind kind of makes up maybe something creepier than what it is if you actually saw what was happening. And a lot of the ghost stories I'd read growing up, a spirit or whatever it was would recreate sounds of like past events, like a family moving out of the house or carrying things down the stairs, screaming, murders. They would always recreate that kind of stuff. And I wanted to add that in here to also help. I guess in a way it also helps, if you think about it, it gives them a clue at what happened. And here's where it starts getting like the short film, the footsteps coming up the stairs. Yeah, ain't no way I'd be in that house. Yeah, that shot right there of the door is like 3 years later. Me out there all by myself on like a February night, just freezing. Yeah, this shot right here, it was so cool right there. If you look at the door, you see a centipede crawling kind of into the darkness with him. I did not time that. It just happened that way. That is such a cool touch. Kind of one of those happy accidents, which we kind of came into a lot on this set. It's like Robert Rodriguez, one of my other idols. He kind of put it like, if you have a project and you just go forward with it, you get so much good luck on you most of the time. Just go forward with it, keep going. You'll be very surprised at what kind of good luck you get thrown at you.
You here?
Yeah, not scaring me my ass. In that basement, that cellar is just as creepy as it looks on film. Eesh. Going down there for some of these shoots was absolutely miserable. I was always worried, because you kind of got to duck down. You can't stand up tall. So if you stood up, you're like your head are in the rafters where, in the rafters are a lot of spider webs. And I'm like, well, God no telling what. There's black widows and brown recluses up in here, and I'm going to friggin' die. And it stunk. It was miserable. Being down there was probably the worst part of this whole shoot. And that was actually, I think this exterior was like kind of one of the only night exteriors. Was our last night we had Ted for the original shoot. It was like October 1st of 2016, somewhere around that time. Hopefully this little scene or the sequence coming up doesn't stir up too many laughs. Because it's pretty funny to me. I guess it could have been funnier if I'd edited it that way, but I wasn't going to. How he kind of looks up, notices her, and then just books it out. Yeah, originally right there on the reveal of her, I had some music. I had music that kind of cued in very, very low, and I got playing with it, and it was so much more effective when I took the music out, and all we heard was just ambience and, the fire and the wind. Yeah, I'd be out of there too. But that, I hope that don't get a lot of, I got a lot of laughs. And right here is a scene, or is a moment when we see that the preacher he's starting to change. He's starting, he's near his arc. 'Cause he's wanting to run away from this, like he has everything else, but he stops. He even looks in, where he looks in the direction like where he needs to go, or where he wants to go. Yeah, and this is where we kind of see him. No, I gotta stand up and face this. I can't run away from it. You got more nuts than I do, I tell you that. And this whole nighttime scene was originally a lot longer. It was a lot of, it's pretty boring, I guess what you'd say, in the original cut. I cut a lot of it down. Right here, there's my feet. God, like 3 years later, just having to go back and recreate all this myself, it was pretty grueling. Yeah, there's me again. I love those point of view shots with the lantern. I was so pleased with that. Like this little, this little path that the lantern's illuminating. Always love that shot too. That's just darkness and it slowly fades in, and here he comes. I thought Ted always ran away pretty funny looking in that. Yeah, that shot right there, I kind of was inspired by El Mariachi. I mean, pretty basic shot, but I always thought of that movie when I shot that.
Heavenly Father, give me strength to face this thing. Come, Lord. Come, Holy Spirit, and fill this place. Fear.
It's not evil. That's why it's not leaving. And there she is again. And originally, I guess, for the haunt here, in the first round of shooting in 2016, I had a different actress and different makeup, for her. And the actress it just didn't look good. She was great, but she was too small. She was almost like a child, and the makeup was pretty bad. So we reshot it a year and a half later during round 2 with a different actress and a different makeup artist. And with a low budget film like this, I couldn't really, I didn't have the money to, bring anybody from LA or Atlanta, like, some big major special effects artists. So I kind of had, the guy I hired was pretty good, but I was never fully satisfied with it, I guess you'd say. So my idea was just pretty much to never really stay on her face very long, half show her in the dark, which is pretty creepy. And then when she comes out of the dark, she comes out quick and we see her for a second, then just bam, she's gone again. She means good, but she doesn't, she doesn't make good decisions on how she's trying to communicate what she wants this guy to do for her. And once again, a little sequence inspired by Chainsaw Massacre, the snap zoom out of the house at night and the crossfade to the moon after a pass out. I hated being there that night because it was, like I was saying, that exterior house on the inside was pretty creepy. Very, 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 very creepy. And being out there at night, and I was unfamiliar with it, having to go over, kind of shoot these angles. It's pretty unsettling, like a lot of these locations were. I guess another funny thing is I showed this film to my mom, and, right there, the preacher, he's lost his handkerchief. And at the end of the movie, after he buries her, he finds it again. She interpreted it as, well, he passed out, so she took his handkerchief, and after he helped her, she gave it back to him. And I'm like, that's a pretty good thought. When I was writing it, my intention, or my idea was that when we saw him run out earlier and, stop himself and go back in, he dropped it right then and there, because it's along that same path at the end of the movie where he finds it. But I like my mom's guess better, so I'm going to go with that story from now on, that the ghost took it from him. Here's where he's got to do it. This is it. Face your fears. Descend into hell. And those are my feet right there. Once again, like in February, 3 years later. Straight Evil Dead style. Yeah, like I said, that basement was exactly what you see. Creepy as hell. Somebody said it kind of gave a Blair Witch type vibe, which, yeah, I like that. I did a lot of movie magic, you'd say editing in this little scene here. Because the first doorway the preacher goes into on the left right there and he looks in is not, when we actually see the point of view in that room, that's not the same room. Yeah, the room that we see right there is actually behind that boarded up doorway. Yeah, this room right there, that's actually the room behind the boarded up doorway. And this little, come here. Yeah, that was actually inspired by an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Originally, I had a tug like on his shirt to get him to kind of, no, look back, it's over here, it's this doorway. But the tug didn't really play on camera, so I dubbed in that come here. And this boarded up doorway, I had to make this myself, like many other things in this film, and I'm pretty proud of it. But so many stories growing up, that my dad would tell me, fake stories. They always would be a boarded up doorway in the cellar, and that image always stuck with me. Like, man, like what's down there behind that doorway in this abandoned house? What does somebody not want you to find? So, I jumped all on it to put this in my film. That whoever, killed this woman and buried her back there, they're just trying to even more to hide it, which obviously it's kind of making it even more obvious. Yeah, dealing with that doorway, my God. Thanks to sound design, it's the illusion is communicated a lot better. And see, now that room right there is actually the first room he looked into, but that's editing. And here we go. Here's me again. I'm setting the lantern down. That's the preacher. There's my foot. I always loved this cellar sequence. My nephew said it was probably the creepiest part for him. And if you look up at the ceiling in a lot of this, you'll see like the electrical wiring. Yeah, but what do? I couldn't rip it out because the place still had electricity. If it was abandoned, if it didn't have electricity, I'd just rip it out. I love that. But yeah, just down here shooting this was a nightmare. Oh, God, I just remember shooting it, half freezing, and just wanting out, just the smell and the atmosphere, just like, God, let's just hurry up and get through this and get the hell out of here. Those nights were, like I said, the worst. And there's the body. Now, see, that right there would scare the living piss out of me, but it doesn't him. And that car right there with Hopewell County Sheriff, that was shot a long time later, and that's actually painted on the preacher's car. And there we go. There's our cicada, kind of, you know, the big symbolic icon of the movie. And that was me in the background. And here's our sheriff and my PA, Cody Clark, who dubbed as the deputy. Yeah. Tom here, who played the sheriff, that's actually Tim Morton's dad, the guy who played Newt. You can see a little resemblance in him, but I just needed a big, kind of hairy, jolly guy to be the sheriff who didn't really care. You know, he just like, yeah, another day on the job. You know, it's just the body found in the cellar. You know, ain't nothing we can do about it. I got better things to do. But he did a great job. He was there for one day, and yeah, old Papa Tom, another legend on the old-time music scene in Louisville. He would always come out to our little jam sessions. Always loved talking to him. I'm glad he agreed to do the movie. But I kind of based his look off of the sheriff from Charles B. Pierce's film Bootleggers.
Probably bury him later today. That reminds me,
I always wish I'd rewritten the scene a little, or I had a chance to rewrite it. But right here, see, the preacher says, "No, I don't want nothing to do with that." Now he's reconsidering. That's another kind of display that he is changing. Because he's like, immediately he goes to his default saying, no. Then he's like, well, wait a minute. He reconsiders, and he's like, this woman does need my help. I'll help her.
I'm going back to the station, and I'll probably see you later this afternoon. Evening sometime, huh?
And there's me again, digging through my pockets. Yeah, don't have his handkerchief. What's he going to do? He's got to keep going. Got to keep moving on without it. Yeah, funny note, this house, my parents almost bought this house at one point, which is pretty cool. I mean, before we went out there to shoot this, and that shot right there, you see the car just kind of creep in the side of the frame. We had to do that because the driveway was paved, and, I couldn't shoot the driveway, so you look behind the seat, you see the fire extinguisher. Once again, yet another scene kind of tying up the loose ends of the preacher. We notice he's changing, and he's starting his apologies. He's never really apologized before, or at least in a very long time. And also, the purpose of this scene is so we know the preacher still has a job. Right now he's still just like uncomfortable around this guy because, this guy's going to fire him any moment or run him out of town. But, right as he walks off, he says, "See you at Bible study Sunday." That's when I had him, I was like, I had the character just stop and turn around and kind of take it in like, a sigh of relief that I still got my job.
Oh, yeah? All right, I'll tell him.
And I wanted to apologize.
Ted did such a good job.
I'm sorry for handling things the way I did.
Yeah?
I went back out there. It's going to be okay now.
Good.
God, Rich is so good.
Okay. Thank you.
See that line right here? Yeah, now we know he's still got his job. Everything's going to be all right.
I'll see you then.
I had Ted do that reaction like 10 times. I don't know why. I wound up using like the second take or the first take. A little, director, stupidity or blindness. There's Cody again. He was with me through a lot of this pre-production. He helped me get all these sets ready, and just because a lot of this I was by myself, and even if he didn't help me, I just wanted somebody there to help boost morale and keep me company, because I was by myself a lot of this movie. That's on the 5.9 millimeter, handheld too. Right there. So right here, it's 2016. Right here, it's like 2018. That's actually, yeah. When we originally shot it, he was dumping cow bones into a hole. And well, when you look at the footage, it's like, that's not human bones. Where's the skull at? Where's the rib cage? Where's any of that? So I was like, damn it, I got to reshoot it. So I bought a fake skeleton, dirtied it up, and up in Lexington, in the middle of the city, I dug a big hole in the backyard of the house I was living into. And I put on the deputy's pants, and that was me again. You saw my leg and my hand. But it was funny while I was shooting that, and we had very close neighbors, and they were looking over the fence like, what in the hell is this guy doing? If anybody ever asked, I would have said, well, I finally got rid of that bitch once and for all. Some people commented too, like, where'd the deputy guy go? He just kind of disappeared. I was like, he just walked off. He don't really have any purpose there. He's not a funeral. And to me, some people ask, like, why don't we hear the prayer? It's like, well, it's not really important. It's not really, doing anything significant in the story. I just wanted, the fact that he's just burying her, putting her to rest, and just take in the environment. Don't worry about that. Take in the peace that she is finally experiencing. And here's where he gets his blankie back. His crutch. And you look at the yard around him there, it's pretty dead, because like I said, that was 2016 in September, and everything was mostly dried up. If I'd reshot this in 2018, it would have been weeds over our head. Yeah, see, look at the weeds there. The yard looks nothing like it did earlier in the movie. Because I wasn't going to reshoot any of this. The actors did a pretty golden performance here. Another little inspiration for this scene was the Heavenly Kid, which not many people know about, where they kind of have this little meeting, and they say their goodbyes, and they walk off, and Ted turns around and looks at them, just like in The Heavenly Kid. And Audra, God, she gave such a great performance. Some people thought she was maybe just scared to death from what happened, but no. I knew this guy from here in Paris. He was mentally retarded pretty bad, and eventually I found out what was actually the matter with him. And a long time ago, his family lived in the mountains, very way off in the mountain, very far away from any city or hospital, and he had gotten sick, and he had this crazy high fever, and it basically gave him brain damage, because they were so off in the middle of nowhere that they couldn't go get help, couldn't take him to a hospital. So he was mentally retarded because of that. And well, that was kind of the inspiration for Ollie there. I guess her backstory I'd come up with was that, this was, the Spanish flu was, years before this, and not very long before this. So, they were so poor and lived so far away, her and Newt, that, she had gotten a crazy high fever. She had got Spanish flu and a crazy high fever, and it gave her brain damage. So that's why she's kind of like, almost like a mute. My big inspiration, I guess my direction for her, was I kind of described to her my grandmother before she died. She died of Alzheimer's, and she would just kind of sit there, like in any family function, wherever we were at, she just kind of sat there and just kind of like she was scared to look around, like she didn't know anything, she didn't know anything or anybody. She would just kind of sit there like she was scared to look around or make eye contact with anybody. So that's kind of, and she didn't say anything. I guess she would only talk to my grandfather, but yeah, it was very weird. And here we go. Going for his habit here of pulling out the handkerchief. Yeah, I don't need this anymore. Look what I did without it. This is holding me back. And we see him smile for the first time in the film. Here's my John Carpenter ending, which I love John Carpenter's ending. He's got the best endings. But, Yeah, originally the camera pans over, we zoom in, and the door creaked open at the very end. But, I got to thinking, it's like, man, that's what the audience expects. And that was kind of one of the last minute additions in the edit room, was just looping the frame to where the door doesn't open. Kind of like the ending of Village of the Damned, how the camera pans over to the little boy and you're expecting his eyes to light up like they always did, but they don't. And it holds on him for a second. It's like, has everything been resolved? Who knows? It kind of visually, communicates that, it leaves that mystery in there. Like, well, maybe it didn't. Nothing happens, but why did the camera hold on it so long? I love this song. It's one of my favorite old time tunes. Cry Holy. Yeah, this film was a hell of a learning experience. My first feature film, and like I heard a friend of mine say one time at his premiere, he said, hopefully this will be the worst thing that I ever make, insinuating that hopefully everything gets better from here. And yeah, I hope and pray that's the same thing for this film. It was a hell of a learning experience. I'm very proud of it, though. Nobody knows how hard I worked on this film, and I don't know if I could ever even communicate it to someone. Only I know, and I guess a few other people who were there. Yeah, like I said, I'd worked this hard this one time, so I would never have to do this again. So hopefully I can, convince people now that I can make a movie. Yeah, I never wanted to film this movie anywhere but Kentucky, because these haunted houses that I grew up seeing, they weren't on 131st Street of Los Angeles like you see in the movies. No, they're way out in the wilderness, way out in the middle of nowhere, where you're isolated. You got nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Yeah, just out there with God knows what. And yeah, I wanted to utilize Kentucky for that, because it had much better locations than they did. And it was very true to my upbringing. What always kind of sparked my curiosity, driving through the country as a kid, riding through the country and looking out the window. And talking about the house up on the hill, or the cemetery up in those trees over there. Well, thank you for watching. This is a Quick Hill Films production of a film by Dane Sears. That's me. Hopefully you enjoyed this film, and I will see you on the next project.